The Mysterious Old Radio Listening Society podcast.
Welcome to the Mysterious Old Radio Listening Society, a podcast dedicated to suspense and crime and horror stories from the golden age of radio. I'm Eric.
I'm Tim.
I'm Joshua.
We love mysterious old-time radio stories, but do they stand the test of time? That's what we're here to find out.
October is Monster Month here on the Mysterious Old Radio Listening Society, and this week's monster is the Mummy. After excavating a veritable tomb of mummy-related stories, I chose Whence Came You from Quiet Please.
Quiet Please was the brainchild of radio and screenwriter Willis Cooper, creator of another famous radio series, Lights Out. In contrast to the grisly horror of Lights Out, Quiet Please was, well, quieter. Cooper relied heavily on the everyman voice of his lead actor, radio and quiz host Ernest Chappell, to tell stories that felt both intimate and fantastical. Together, the duo created some of radio's most original and lasting works, including the all-time horror classic, The Thing on the Forbleboard.
Quiet Please debuted on the Mutual Broadcasting Network on June 8, 1947. In September 1948, the series switched to ABC and remained there until its final broadcast on June 25, 1949. In total, 106 episodes were made, 89 of which still exist today. Unfortunately, many of these recordings are of extremely poor quality and make listening to them difficult. But Cooper's rich imagination combined with Chappell's engrossing performance make the effort worthwhile.
Quiet Please is often categorized as horror, probably due to Cooper's roots in the genre. But Richard Hand, author of Terror on the Air, argues any attempt to categorize the series feels like diminishing the scope of its achievement. In his essential reference book, The Encyclopedia of Old-Time Radio, author John Dunning describes Willis Cooper as radio's best practitioner of an almost surrealistic, dramatic form that sometimes reads as poetry but contains all the elements of the play.
But what about Whence Came You? Does it defy classification? Is it horror, romance, Masonic propaganda? Does it even qualify as a mummy story? Well, that's what we're about to find out.
It's late at night and a chill has set in. You're alone, and the only light you see is coming from an antique radio. Listen to the sounds coming from the speaker, listen to the music, and listen to the voices.
Quiet, please. Mutual Broadcasting System presents Quiet Please, which is written and directed by Willis Cooper, and which features Ernest Chappell. Quiet Please for tonight is called Whence Came You? I came from Jerusalem. I've traveled in the East a good deal in the last 20-odd years, and I flatter myself that I know my way around. So when I got off the plane at Cairo, I didn't start for the camp right away as a good storybook archaeologist would have done. I made a beeline for Shepherd's in the room I'd left a couple of days before when I went to Jerusalem. A bath, a gin and tonic, and a large batch of mail from the States. What more can a man ask? In Cairo on a hot night? But of course it was too good to last. Just gonna let him knock.
Hey, Austin, wake up.
Now, who the...
Hey, it's Dave Feldman.
Dave Feldman? Hey!
Hi, Austin. We got from State and Matters.
Well, I'll be darned. Come on in. What are you doing here? What do you got there?
I do get around, don't I? This is gin and tonic. How are you?
Well, I'm fine, but... Come in. Well, sit down. You're the last man in the world that I...
Here, take a gin and tonic before I drop it. Well,
I'm in spades, Dave. By golly, I'm glad to see you, boy.
I'm glad to see you. I've been looking here for 3 days waiting for you to come back. Hey, you look skinnier.
Well, you go out and dig holes out there for 6 months, lad. You'll take off some of that fat, too.
Me, fat? Go away, you're kidding. Well, get your shirt on and let's go see the town.
Sit down. Come on, what you doing here?
Business?
Yeah, what kind of business?
Newspaper business, Natch. What's cooking in the Middle East and stuff? Say, how do you get more of these things?
We'll get on the bar in a minute. They're colder down there. Well, go on. Tell me about it.
Well, you know, Eddie Hefferkamp just called me in and said draw some dough and go east and send him some stuff for the Sunday feature section. The Trib's making a monkey out of us again. So I remember the dear old days on the Midway, you and me, and you're around here, so let's go see the town, huh?
Well, I'll be darned. When'd you leave Chicago?
Day before yesterday.
Oh, boy.
Yep, the loot's still there. They still got the Burlicue shows on South State Street. The Michigan Avenue Bridge is always up. The Cubs are in 7th place. Now?
Now what?
Now we go see the town? Come on, put on your pants.
You never been in Cairo before, have you?
Me? Not me. Why?
Well, if you had, you wouldn't care much about seeing it, my boy.
Yeah?
Yeah.
But, women.
You had a good look at any of them?
Have I? Oh, boy.
What?
The one that's waiting for you downstairs.
Waiting for me?
Wow.
What are you talking about? I don't know any women in Cairo.
Well, there's one who knows you.
Why, you're crazy.
I'm telling you.
How do you know?
She's been waiting down there for 3 days. I've seen her.
What'd she look like?
Oh, boy.
Not a native.
Cleopatra.
Is this one of your bum jokes, Abe?
I give you my word of honor.
I don't get it.
Come on downstairs and you will.
So we went downstairs. British colonels, American traveling salesmen, Egyptian army officers. A fee for two, a bevy of the ugliest women in the world. And I don't see any woman waiting for me.
There. By the door to the bar.
And I looked. And there by the door stood the one most beautiful woman I have ever seen in all my life. She was no Egyptian native. She might have descended from one of the marvelously lifelike paintings of a queen of the Hathor dynasty that I'd seen on the walls of tombs 2,000 years old. How can I describe her? I say her eyes were black. Her hair was black and cut in the manner of the days of the shepherd kings that ruled the valley of the Nile 1,000 years before the pyramids were built. Red lips that smiled at me slowly. I felt my knees tremble as she looked into my eyes.
Come on, let's go ask her if she's got a friend.
And when I looked back at her, where'd she go? It was midnight, and then 1 o'clock, and 2, and then 3. We still walked the streets of Cairo. The waning moon was rising in the northeast behind our shoulders as we turned our steps back to the hotel. Twice I thought I'd seen her, and twice she, if she it was, disappeared into a narrow winding street where we couldn't follow. No, I never followed women about the streets of a foreign city before, not in all my life. Well, there's little enough of that in the life of an archaeologist. The women we followed died 1,000, 10,000 years before we were born. We know them only by their portraits painted on the walls of a musty tomb. By what we find in great hermetically sealed stone caskets, wrapped in rust-colored linen and smelling of the ghost of cinnamon and myrrh and spikenard. I don't know why I did this.
I know. She wanted you to come after her.
Well, that's ridiculous, Abe.
I heard her ask for you.
Well, what would she want of me?
What does a pretty gal usually want of a guy? Drinks, something to eat, a good time?
She could have had that from anybody.
Yeah, me, for instance. But she wanted you, Austin.
Well, why?
Maybe she's a spy or something.
A spy?
Maybe she wanted to sell you something. You know, you grave robbers. Maybe she knows where some old pharaoh or somebody is planted.
Yeah, that could be, I suppose. Well, I'm for bed. I got to get out to the diggings early.
Fine night we had.
Well, forget it. You got a room, huh?
Yeah, right down the hall. Well, knock on my door when you get up.
All right. Good night.
Night. Say, they have this incense all the time around this place, huh?
What do you mean?
Don't you smell it? Smells like a funeral.
I don't. Oh. Yeah, I suppose. Night.
Night, Austin.
I could have told him what the incense was. I've smelled cinnamon and myrrh and spikenard too often not to recognize it instantly. When I opened the door to my room, the smell was almost overpowering, used as I am to the funeral spices of ancient Egyptian tombs. No, I'm not going to tell you that a beautiful Egyptian princess of the days of Hyksos was waiting for me in the darkness. This isn't a ghost story. It's a true story. There wasn't anyone in the room. I turned on the lights, opened the window. There wasn't anyone in the room. So I went to bed, dreamed about sailing on Lake Michigan. The storm came up and the thunder crashed. And I was scared to death. Then I woke up and the thunder was the servant knocking on my door, bringing me my morning cup of tea. Abe and I got in my Jeep and rode out to the excavation. It's quite a distance from Cairo. But never mind just where it is, because that's my business. And the university's. That right rear tire went flat just as I'd been expecting. I'd forgot to put air in the spare, so we took quite a while getting it pumped up. It was late in the afternoon when we got there. Abe had never seen anything of this sort. You see, Abe, these places are built one on top of another. Almost every village and town in the east is.
Different periods of time, huh?
Yeah, that's right. There may be any number of cities built above the ruins of another. All we do is dig out the top one, you see, recover everything we can that's of historical importance, then go on carefully down to the next.
What do you do with the stuff that's on top?
It has to be destroyed, naturally.
Oh, gee, that's too bad, ain't it?
Well, we make careful records, photographs.
And then you just peel off the stuff and go on to the next.
That's right. This is the fourth city from the top we're working on now. See that big pile of rubble over there?
Yeah.
That's the remains of the other three cities.
Gee, that seems a shame. All those years of work and living and everything.
Well, we save artifacts, of course.
Save what?
Things that people made, potsherds, fragments of wall paintings, decorations, that sort of thing.
What do you do with the people you find?
People?
Yeah.
Oh, mummies. Various things. We read the inscriptions, decide whether the fellow is important enough to investigate further. The Egyptian government has a great deal to say about the contents of tombs, you know.
Find any gold?
Not here so far, but we probably will. This part where we're standing was the necropolis of this particular city.
Uh-huh.
The cemetery, you see.
Oh, yeah.
It's reasonable to suppose that there are other tombs under here.
That's where you find the jewels and the gold and stuff.
Generally, yes.
Say, Austin, why don't you get a steam shovel in here? You'd move this stuff a lot quicker.
And probably smash some priceless inscriptions or paintings into bits. No, my boy, we do this gently.
Uh-huh. And you can read this stuff, huh? The hieroglyphics?
Hieroglyphics comes from two Greek words originally meaning carving by priests.
Okay, Professor. Can you read it?
Yeah, of course. I can read a good deal of the later writings by sight. When we get down to the real ancient stuff, that's a little more difficult.
What does this say?
What?
This slab here.
Now, let's see. Here was I, Hotep, presented with I guess you'd say invested with, the working tools of those who build. In my hand, I, Hotep, took the tools of the second grade of workmen in stone, the plumb, the square, and
The level, huh?
How'd you know?
There were masons in those days.
Well, sure. How do you think they built all this stone stuff?
Hey, look at that. What's that there?
It's a name. Sholem, it's probably Solomon. Yeah, this was in Solomon's time.
Right alongside the name.
The middle stone of an arch, which is the secret.
The keystone. These fellas didn't know how to build an arch.
Well, that's right, they didn't. Why are you so excited about it, though?
Hey,
What?
look at that.
This? Yeah, that's a very fine example of wall painting. Look how the colors are still bright. Look how they...
Yeah. You see the same thing I see, don't you?
You know what I saw. You know whose portrait was painted on the edge of the slab that came from a tomb that was old in the time of Augustus Caesar? Coincidence or not, here was the face of the woman who waited for me the night before in Shepherd's Hotel. It's amazing how racial characteristics persist through centuries in Egypt. I have seen Egyptian men who might have been Tutankhamun's own brother. I've seen women, but you wouldn't blame me for feeling my hackles rise a little at this uncanny resemblance to the woman who disappeared. I kept smelling myrrh and spikenard and cinnamon. But I hadn't much time to think of it then. Martin Weaver, who was in charge of the actual excavation, came up behind us.
Well, I'm glad you're back, Orson.
Oh, hello, Martin. How are we doing? Dave Felden, Martin Weaver.
How are you?
Hello.
Well, day before yesterday, we broke through a place, Orson, that goes down to the city underneath this one.
You did?
Yeah, one of the workmen found a big sandstone slab, and we cleared it away completely. I've got the big shears rigged over it now, and I thought we'd wait till you got here to lift the slab. You want to do it tonight or what?
Oh, gosh, let's do it now, Austin.
Well, what do you think? Getting dark.
Let's have a look at it.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're back. Bring anything to drink with you?
We walked half a mile. There was a little clearing at one corner of the necropolis, and the beams of the shears stood stark against the darkening sky. There was something elemental, something deathly about them. It's not an archaeologist's job to be sentimental or superstitious. None of us would stay on the job very long if we were. But the half-inch steel cable was attached to a block of stone that was the only thing that separated us from something that happened perhaps 40 centuries ago. And, well, there are times when a man's entitled to shiver a little in the wind that rises over the desert at sunset. Abe was beside himself with excitement.
Let's pull it up, Austin. Go on, let's pull it up, huh?
Go ahead, Martin.
Okay. Glad we got the engine. That slab weighs about 70 tons.
Go ahead. A little higher.
Gosh. The air down there.
That air you're breathing, Abe, was breathed by pharaohs long before Moses led his people out of this country.
Gee.
Okay, hold it, Martin.
Right.
You going down there, Austin?
Tomorrow?
Oh, not now?
No, it's late.
Oh, gee, I'd like to go down there.
We will in the morning.
How is it?
Let's take your flashlight.
Yeah.
Mummy case, some wall paintings.
Let me see.
Take the flashlight.
Oh, boy. It isn't far down there. I'm going to jump down.
No, wait.
Don't do that. I'll be all right.
Now, don't go running all over that place, tracking it up, Abe.
I won't, boy. It's dark down here.
Get a ladder, Martin.
Yeah, okay.
You hear me, Abe?
I hear you. Throw me your flashlight.
Doggone it, that's the last time you... Here. Now stand still.
I'm standing still. Hey, Austin,
What?
there's a picture on the wall.
What picture?
Over here on the wall, darn it. I dropped the light.
Well, stand still. Martin will be back in a minute with his light.
Austin,
What?
there's something in here.
Well, be careful. It might be a snake.
No, it ain't a snake.
Abe. Abe. Abe, what happened?
Look out, Austin, look out, the slab.
night long, Martin and I, splicing that steel cable and raising the heavy slab that had imprisoned Abe in that place of the dead. We had no hope, but what could we do? A miracle might have happened. There might have been a chink between the slab and the opening it covered, an opening through which a few breaths of air might have seeped into the tomb. The snake might not have bitten him. He might have killed it. So we told each other all through the night. The stubborn cable cut our hands and defied our every effort. The sun was just rising when we at last had made it fast, and Martin started the engine. We fastened the rope onto the cable, and we swung the great stone slab aside. I was down in the tomb almost before it had cleared the opening. It was too late. I nearly sickened as I called to Martin. He jumped down, too.
Oh, my good... What happened to him?
I thought it was a snake.
No snake did that.
No.
I saw a pigeon once that a hawk had been at.
We'd have been too late even if the slab hadn't fallen.
Well... Lawson.
What?
That mummy case. Was the cover off it last night when you looked down here?
No. Why, Abe couldn't have.
That lid weighs 10 tons.
Then we looked down into the stone coffin. I hope I shall never see the like of that again.
What is it?
The mummy of a man. A tall man in a robe of gold cloth. Not wrapped in linen bindings, just a robe of gold cloth with strange symbols woven into the cloth. And his head. Not a man's head. The head of a hawk. No, not a mask. We looked carefully. A man with the head of a hawk. And the hawk's beak all dabbled with red. I didn't believe it either. It couldn't be. But it was. It was the father of all the Egyptian gods, Osiris. Osiris, the brother husband of Isis, the founder of the world's first empire. Osiris, who was murdered 16,000 years ago. And his body was hidden by Isis, his wife, with a blasting curse on any who might find his tomb. It was impossible. It couldn't be. But there it was. And Martin and I and the dead man were there in his tomb with him. And the curse hung heavy in the musty air around us. And then the first rays of the sun, reflected from something above us, stole down into the tomb. And I saw the pictures on the wall. I saw Osiris with his hawk's head. And the robe he wore and the mitre on his hawk's head was the same that the mummy wore in a casket. I saw Isis, his wife, weeping over the body of her murdered husband. And the beauty of the work of the long-dead artist was unbelievable. And I saw another picture. There was the daughter of Isis and Osiris. Yes, of course I could read the inscriptions. Yes. Of course I could recognize her face. I'd seen it before. In the lobby of Shepherd's Hotel. And the inscriptions on the wall were terrifying. There were secrets there that men would give their lives to possess today. There were secrets there that we've only begun to imagine today. I'm a scientist, I know. Or do I? We forgot the thing in the coffin. We forgot the thing on the floor. And it grew darker and darker in the tomb. And I read on and on. I stood before the painting of the one who was Osiris' daughter. Long black hair. and red lips that smiled at me. And my heart stopped at the inscription under the portrait. I read it over again. Be not afraid. Carved into the living rock in the ancient hieratic characters uncounted centuries ago. Not by the hand of the artist. I knew who had carved my name there. Be not afraid, Austin. And I wasn't afraid at all when I discovered that the thing that was making a dock down there was a great slab of sandstone, slowly swinging around and down to imprison us all in the tomb that the wife of Osiris had cursed. Martin Weaver was a very brave man. Martin Weaver didn't scream and cry in the heavy dark. Martin Weaver talked to me quietly.
It'll be all right, Austin. The workmen will be here before long, and they'll see the slab, and Ibrahim knows how to run the engine.
I hope so, Martin. I hope they'll be in time.
They'll be in time. He'll start the engine and pull the thing off. All right.
I hope so, Martin.
Sure. They'll know that something's wrong.
Where are you?
Right here.
Well, stand still.
I am standing still.
I thought I heard you move.
Oh. You afraid, Austin?
Are you?
Not particularly. But
Yes.
And the thing in the... Where are you going?
I haven't moved.
I thought I felt your hand on my arm.
No. Sit still. Don't use up the air.
Well, you sit still.
I tell you, I didn't move.
Something's moving.
It couldn't be.
Austin?
What? Martin. 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 Answer me, Martin. And there was nothing but silence. And then another footstep. And I felt a hand on my arm, and I screamed with terror. But it was a gentle hand, and it led me gently away from where I stood in the dark. And I followed. I hit my head on a solid stone wall. My feet dragged as I followed whoever it was through a door that I knew couldn't be there. And a voice breathed in my ear. Austin. And I smelled cinnamon and myrrh and spikenard. And I followed on. And soon there was a glimmering of light ahead of me, and I felt the hand release my arm, and I walked on toward the light. Then, in a little while, another little room hewn out of the solid rock, and a light burning. A little bronze lamp at the head of a mummy case of lacquered painted wood. And the portrait image on the lid of the sarcophagus. The same face. A smile. And I came closer to read the inscription I knew would be there. An inscription put there so many, many years ago. I have freed you, Austin. Now free me. My hand went to the fastening of the lid when I looked up to the wall above. The portrait again. But with a difference. The same costume, the same jewelry, the same headdress. But the head was the head of a hawk. The head of Osiris' daughter. So I sit here, and the little bronze lamp is flickering low. No. I haven't opened the coffin. I'm afraid to.
was Ernest Chappell.
And Murray Forbes played Abe Feldman. Martin Weaver was Don Briggs. As usual, the original music for Quiet Please is composed and played by Albert Berman. Now for a word about next week's Quiet Please. Here is my good friend, our writer-director, Willis Cooper.
I've got a story for you next week called Put on the Dead Man's Coat. It's about a man who had an idea that wasn't good for him.
Put on the Dead Man's Coat. The title of next week's Quiet Please. And so until next week at this time, I am quietly yours, Ernest Chappell. Comes to you from New York. This is the Mutual Broadcasting System.
That was Whence Came You from Quiet Please here in the Mysterious Old Radio Listening Society podcast. Once again, I'm Eric.
I'm Tim.
And I'm Joshua.
And this is Monster Month, and we're kicking off Monster Month here on the podcast with The Mummy. Just want to talk a little about Monster Month, how we're kind of hitting just the universal movie classic monsters, but that to me is Halloween.
Yes.
That's all I want to watch every Halloween, and it's all I want to talk about is Mummy, Dracula, Frankenstein, Werewolf, and Invisible Man. You know, that's all I want to do. So I was very excited heading into these 5 episodes this month, and particularly very excited about being able to talk with you guys about this. First of all, man, I love Quiet Please.
Yeah.
I was introduced to Quiet Please by you guys. And we've done 3?
Yes, this is our 3rd one. Really fast on the heels of Thing on the Four-Wheel Board, but I couldn't resist given the Mummy theme.
Well, this 3rd one, I have finally decided that I don't think it can fail. I enjoy it so much. And it's really that introduction and that piano. I guess I'm kind of giving away what I thought of this episode before we get too far into it. But is there a reason why Suspense or perhaps Escape and maybe some others are more culturally remembered than Quiet Please?
I think most of Quiet Please's episodes were lost for a long time. I'm not a great historian on the subject, but I'm pretty sure the bulk of the episodes that exist today were uncovered in the 80s.
Wow.
And a lot of them are of really poor quality. Not Whence Came You that we just listened to, but the majority of them are like you need to put in headphones and you need to be devoted and really listen hard and maybe even have one of the scripts that are online in front of you to hear some of them. So I think that's part of it. And it was never as popular in its day. It was sort of a critic's darling, but not a mainstream success the way Lights Out had been for Willis Cooper.
That's interesting and unfortunate. All of that. My first note is I went back and wrote my first note after listening to it. And I wrote, I didn't take a lot of notes. And it was because I was transfixed. The more notes I take, the more snarky they usually are. You know?
See, Eric, I took 4 pages worth of typed notes on this episode. I kid you not. But I've heard it before, and it is such a complex, well-written story that it's hard not to. If you've heard it a couple times, I kept seeing and hearing more things in the story, starting with the title, which the first couple times I listened to it, it kind of went past me, but then I was listening to it for the podcast, and I went, Whence Came You? Seems like it's from something. I feel like I should know that. And so I did a little Googling, and this is apparently full of Freemasonry stuff. Whence Came You is lifted straight from the entered apprentice ritual, apparently. That's something like the Grand Master asked the apprentice, whence came you? And the answer is from the lodge of the Holy Saint John of Jerusalem. So he echoes that line right at the beginning, because the title's Whence Came You, and his first line is, I came from Jerusalem. So it's an intentional.
How do you know that? I thought masonry was supposed to, it was all secret. Are you a mason?
No, it actually
if
took
you are cool, I want to know the handshake and I want in.
It took a lot to find it, because there's a lot of weird stuff.
You're being followed. You have triggered alarms all over the internet.
No,
You're not supposed to know that much about masons. It's all secret.
There is actually a podcast called Whence Came You that is a Freemason podcast. And that's the first thing that came up when I Googled Whence Came You. And in fact, I found from several years ago, this podcast, Whence Came You, serialized Whence Came You, the Quiet Please episode, over 5 episodes of their podcast and talked about the different Mason stuff in it.
How can they have a podcast? Isn't everything supposed to be secret?
It's not what it once was. I mean, you can...
How do you know that?
I can introduce you to a Mason.
It's the age of the internet. There's no privacy for secret societies anymore.
Oh, you watch. We're about to make this a secret thing. As soon as we're done, we're getting a secret handshake. The 3 of us. It is exceptionally well written. I did not know it was full of masonry, Masonic symbolism.
To get a little my geek on it, there was a little reminiscence of Cask of Amontillado, the Poe story, because in that story, as Montresor is leading his buddy, whose name I forgot, down, there's a little misunderstanding between them, similar to the one in this story of someone referring to masonry and that. And the one person doesn't know what they're talking about, and the other one recognizes it as a secret society, and it sort of implies a difference in class between them, a difference in social potential.
Yeah, I also think it was a little bit of a joke. He was like, yeah, there were Masons back then. And he's like, yeah, look.
They make stone stuff.
They make stone stuff, yeah. But I also wonder if there's a slight suggestion of some connection with the Mason things that Abe recognizes, which causes him to become so excited and literally leap into the abyss and get himself killed. So there might be more Freemason stuff going on in here than what I picked up on.
They mentioned Solomon, who was the master builder, if I have my Masonry lore right in my head.
Yeah, the lore of Masonry is all connected to the steps of building Solomon's temple and blah, 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 blah. I don't understand it, but I know that's a big
offense,
deal.
Masons, but blah, 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 blah. Powerful behind the scenes. George Washington was one, helped found our country.
Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, I didn't catch any of that.
I didn't catch it the first time I listened to it.
It jumped out at me because I'm a fan of secret society stuff and global conspiracy and the Illuminati, and it's just, I love those kinds of stories. I grew up with that.
So let's talk about the story itself. I love the writing. There's some phrases that I started to write down, but just rust-colored wrap smelling of cinnamon and myrrh. Smells like a funeral was a great descriptor to me. When you're writing a novel, of course, there's those descriptors, but when you're writing radio, if you use too much novel-like descriptors, then you're just being read a book. And I think there's a specific style to writing description for radio that I think they absolutely nailed to create that imagery and that theater of the mind in my head.
Well, and Cooper and Chappell are such a great pairing. Both of them bring so much that Cooper knows how to write for Chappell's voice, and Chappell can deliver Cooper's lines so well.
Yes.
If it smells like a funeral, it really serves to put you, it's a great turn of phrase, and it puts you in the character's perspective, because these stories are so strongly in Chappell's character's perspective.
Another great line is, "This isn't a ghost story. This is a true story."
By the end, sorry to interrupt, but by the end, I was so taken with that line because it was, in an entertaining way, the narrative equivalent of going down one street and then backing out, and we're going to go a different direction. The dirty trick of it is, the way we're going to go is so much weirder than a ghost story. But it's given to you in the context of, it's nothing weird.
Yeah, and I think it plays into, thematically what the story is overall about. It feels like it runs in this engine of inevitability. It's almost a little of that free will versus fate when he gets into the tomb, finds that his name was written there thousands of years ago. He's saying, this isn't a ghost story, it's a true story. These are facts that can't be changed, that all leads up to him sort of moving down this course. There are even moments when he says to the audience, to the listeners, when he first sees at the dig the painting of the mysterious woman from the bar, he says, "You know what I saw there."
Yeah.
He has this idea that I'm just moving on this path until he finally gets to the point where he has a decision to make. at the very end when he's going to open the coffin and you just freeze there because finally he has to do something. He's not being dragged along this path. He's finally reached a point of choice and it just freezes there.
Why do you think it ended there? And before you answer that, I want to express how much I dislike open-ended endings. And I think we've discussed this before.
Oh, yeah.
ABC After School Special, and they would stop it, and then we had to discuss them as a class. Like, what would you do if you were the bully in this? And I'm like, no, just tell me what happens. I don't like not knowing what's in the briefcase in Pulp Fiction and those kind of things that make me crazy. In this story, for the first time I can think of, I'm not bugged by that ending. In fact, it creeped me out. I loved it. I pumped my fist. Yeah, that's a cool way to end this. First of all, did you like it? And second of all, why?
I liked it. And in fact, my enjoyment of it wasn't so much that it didn't go too far. I enjoyed it because it actually went farther than I would have expected. The story, according to my own sort of horror story biorhythm, felt like it normally would have ended when Martin died. And then he's just trapped in this chamber. And then there's the rest of the story. And then he's taken into this other chamber. And there's more to it. So in some ways, I felt that was bonus extra story.
Right.
Yeah, it reminded me a little of thing on the Forble board in that Austin, was put in kind of a similar situation where the daughter of Osiris was saying, I freed you, now you owe me. I mean, the creature in Forble board didn't do something for him, but that is feeling of obligation. And here you don't know what he's going to do.
Had that.
Yeah, Behind the Locked Door had that as well. That's why I really liked it, that he had a dilemma that was not just life and death dilemma. If I open this, is she just going to kill me? Or do I actually really owe her? Because she led me out of this chamber with Osiris, the hawk-headed, which he didn't have a hawk head in Egyptian mythology. I think it was Horus, his son. So I think Cooper
the fact that you even know any of that.
I did bother to look up, like, did Osiris and Isis have a daughter traditionally?
No. Horus, who had
Horus
a hawk
was the son,
head,
and then there was another
or falcon
son.
head.
You guys just can't enjoy anything.
This is how we enjoy it.
This is enjoyment for me. I love the ending. It's a frozen moment of horror.
It's really terrifying to think of him sitting in there. How long?
And I think that's part of it, too. It suggests that he might just sit there. He might not make a choice.
Yeah. Kind of.
He might run out of air, because they suggest with that slab over the top of the tomb that there might not be enough air when they're trying to save Abe. So he might just keel over.
Right. And I'm sure that the trail mix is stale by now, so there's not much to eat. The old Egyptian.
Oh, I wasn't sure
the
where your joke
manna
was
you
going.
take with you to the other world, I'm
The
sure.
old trail mix Egyptian joke.
Yes, they had trail mix. They invented trail mix.
Traditional.
I'm just trying to
gorp.
keep up here. Just throwing some stuff out
He's
there.
just making up research that he did.
Yes.
I'm not above it.
Exactly right.
One thing I want to talk about is the one thing that made me kind of uncomfortable in here, and I tried to do some research on it, was this weird idea that Egyptian women are beastly ugly. It struck me as a pretty racist
I'm
stuff.
dying to know what you Googled for the
Egyptian women stereotypes. I didn't know if this was like a stereotype that I had somehow missed, or if it was just Cooper trying to set up this mystery woman who is so beautiful. So he just decided to denigrate an entire race to set up his story a little better. Right. But it's pretty harsh.
Right.
Yeah.
I think that we, as old-time radio fans, listen to a lot of things that have gross stereotypes. And I think it hit me harder than others because I'm such a fan of Cooper. And I project this sort of temporal enlightenment on him because I think he's so smart and I love his script. So I just wanted to say that as we're praising this up and down, that was a little tough to hear.
Not one of the elements we're praising.
Yes.
Right. Outstanding denigration of women. Man, first rate.
But now back to how awesome those movies. I love, as usual, the really casual intro we get to his character. I'm not a storybook archaeologist, so I went back to my room. I had a gin and tonic, read my mail from America, and then this is the first time I caught this, like my third time listening to it. I think there's a little bit of a dirty joke in here. Did you catch it right at the top? No. He goes back to his hotel room for a bath, a gin and tonic, and a large batch of mail from the States. And then he says, what more could a man ask for there's this pause, and then he says, "In Cairo on a hot night?" Go back and listen. There's this ellipsis where there's some answer to that question we don't hear, and he responds to with, "No."
Interesting.
No.
I thought
usually that's what a man would ask for, but no, it's too hot. And have you seen the women?
What other observations, gentlemen, about...
I think it's this old-fashioned idea of what being dressed was, because when Abe, who I love, by the way, comes into his room at first and he keeps trying to get him to go out with him, he's like, "Hey, put on a shirt, let's go out." And I was like, is he shirtless? But okay, he's probably just in an undershirt. And then there's some more dialogue, and then he's like, "Let's go out, put on some pants." And I'm like, Austin, are you just buck naked drinking a gin and tonic?
I did have to stop and like, okay, I'm going to, in my head, put him in like pajamas pants. Maybe a robe.
I caught that as well, and I had a giggle, and I thought it was just super hot. I think it would be awesome if he was just walking around with a gin and tonic naked.
It's not as awesome as it sounds.
Yeah. Theater of the mind, ladies and gentlemen. Radio is whatever you want it to be.
Next podcast, naked with gin and tonic, boys. We'll never get through it.
I also wanted to call out because I thought it was so amazing, the dialogue of when Martin and he are trapped, trying to convince each other that they're both sitting still.
That is amazing, that passage.
That is one of the top 5 radio drama scenes of all time. I thought it was brilliantly written, terrifying, and
they're both so calm, and I'm freaking out.
It is a lesson in understatement as a performer, as a director,
as a writer.
And it was intended from the writing, because I think that whole scene opens with Austin praising how brave Martin was, which automatically gets you frightened because he's talking in the past tense. He's kind of almost eulogizing him, and you're like,
he has 3 sentences in a row to start with his name.
Yep.
Martin was a brave man.
Martin is so dead.
Yes.
You're like, oh, wow. And even when he dies, it's this creepy sigh. He just sort of exhales.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's not a blood-curdling scream, and it all moves you toward this really kind of weird, somber funeral process. Then he's just sort of escorted solemnly into the next chamber to open this sarcophagus.
So he does hit his head on the wall.
Comedy!
And the old 3,000-year-old banana peel. Let's vote. I will start. I didn't quite do that kind of in-depth research. Again, though, I am going to pay this a compliment that my notes, I just stopped typing. Then I thought I should go back now and get some smart pants notes and make sure I know what I'm talking about. But I decided not to for really, truly this reason. I was enthralled. I was scared. I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was suspenseful, and I had never heard it before. It is up there with the Boris Karloff Mummy Universal movie, which I also adore. I am listening to this every Halloween for the rest of my life.
Wow.
I would say this is a classic. I was struck listening to it of a little bit of what might, if I listened to all of Quiet Please, would be a little formulaic aspect of Chappell's character, which on the one hand, I've loved it twice. Why would I not love it another 90 times? But if I were to sit down and listen to all 90 of these, eventually I might go, it's kind of the same. If it ends up being kind of the same. But having heard it twice now, 3 times, yes. Mm-hmm. It's awesome, and I want to hear it more.
Yeah, I think this is a classic, with the only caveat being the
ugly
swipe
women.
At all of Egyptian women. And honestly, aside from that, I don't think you would have any guess that this was from 1948. I mean, on the page, this could be a really contemporary story.
I thought of one more thing I wanted to add before we close it out, of the description of Osiris, when they find him in there, of that there's this critical moment of, I'm either going to lose the audience completely here, or if they go with me, they'll go with me through anything, of just this creature man thing in their robe, hawkhead. Yep, worked.
But I think that's why Cooper takes such efforts to make you live the real mundane life of his protagonist, so you feel him, you feel like you know him, so that he can lead you by the end of the story into somewhere fantastical and incredible, and you're totally on board.
He's got a little bit of Hitchcock in him, in the writing that I've seen so far, in the idea of, average, everyday guy in fantastical situations. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you for bringing this for us, Joshua, and thank you to everybody for listening. Tim?
Hey, you should go to ghoulishdelights.com. There you can find other episodes of this podcast, and you can find out information about live performances we do, because we do live versions of some classic old radio scripts, and information about that can be found at ghoulishdelights.com.
You can also go to iTunes and write a review. Please write a review. And, if you're writing a review of this episode, let us know if you're a Freemason and what level you're at. If you're at, like, the spackle level, I don't know what levels the Freemasons have. Okay.
Although, that's very high level.
That's a record speed.
I think that's what it's based on.
Yes.
Oh. If you want to continue listening next week, we're going to continue Monster Month, and it's my pick.
Yeah.
And we are going to go with the monster Frankenstein and do the classic version from Suspense. So, until then...
Look out!
Now?
Now what?
Now we go see the town? Come on, put on your pants.